Welcome to another episode of Off the Line. This is your source of information, insights, and opinions. Tonight on the program, we will have Paula Salvosa. We will be talking about mental health in the middle of this coronavirus 19 crisis. Also, we'll be talking about the Christian behavior. It's going to be a very interesting topic. I know it's a hot topic to handle, but nevertheless, we will try to be as positive as we can. But before that, let me just, of course, promote again our Sally Diag Christian Online Short Film Contest. And before I get Paula on board, let's watch this short clip of Sally Diag Festival. Here we go, guys. All right, and without further ado, I bring you Paula Salvosa. Paula, how are you? Good evening to you.
Hi, good evening, Kuya Nori, Sir Nori. Yeah. So yeah, thank you for having me tonight. My name is Paula Salvosa. I used to be a youth pastor of a Christian band here in the Philippines,
Mhm,
and now I am the founder and executive director of MindLove movement,
mhm.
which caters to the biopsychosocial, o diba nga ba?
Lalim nun ah.
Biopsychosocial needs of people with mental health struggles. So we are a movement, and we aim to help every individual who have mental health struggles. When it holistically, when it includes physical,
Mhm,
mental, emotional,
mhm.
relational, and spiritual needs.
So,
Yes.
anyways, the reason why I got you on board is we are on our
Yeah.
fourth month, going fourth
Yeah.
month, dito sa
Mm,
coronavirus 19.
mm,
And there's just a lot of people right now who are
mm.
struggling with anxiety, with worries, and so on
Depression.
and so forth. Yes. And so, testimony mo can be very,
Mm.
very useful to a lot of people. So, how should one how should one first detect that they are having some mental health issues in this current crisis?
There are three causes why our mental health is how our mental health or why our mental health is starting to deteriorate. Number one, I mentioned before, environmental. Number two, psychological. And third, of course, is biological. But that doesn't mean you're not normal because same as, for example, your heart starts deteriorating and you were diagnosed with a heart disease, perhaps. Okay. And it's also similar with our brain being diagnosed with bipolar, for example. You see, so as important our physical health is, that's also how important our mental health is.
For a regular folk, what should they be doing? Anong dapat nilang gawin para just to keep their sanity?
Mhm. Well, yung sinabi niyo po, what you said, that you're trying to do things so that you can cope, and those are coping mechanisms. Those are defenses for us to attempt to lessen the feelings of anxiety. Okay, some people, they would intellectualize and become philosophical, to distance ourselves from the feelings, but you're still speaking wise words. Or some will, blame other people to who we perceive to be the source of our anxiety. We try to locate the problem in the person so that we can feel more secure. Or some people may minimize or deny the anxiety exists in the first place, and they attempt to reverse it and say that it's actually a very good thing, a very good thing. Okay, what's happening right now? They minimize without acknowledging the pain, and that's where the problem arises.
So
Because
isn't it a good thing na people are are going towards the optimist point of view
Kasi
para paano ba?
there's what we call toxic positivity na okay lang yan, yung iba nga ganito yung pinagdadaanan. When there's where you can there's another side of the spectrum where you can offer hope and validation. Kasi for example, Sir Nori, someone says na I'm feeling so depressed. Oh, yeah, it's all in the mind. It will only trigger the depression, or it will only trigger the anxiety even more. Whereas if you validate that we understand you're having anxiety and you're having depression, it's valid. But there's hope. We can talk it through, and that's what I'm going to discuss. Mabilis lang. It's going to be concise on
Sige.
how we can cope. A
Sige,
healthy
excited ako dyan.
yes, healthy coping mechanisms on how we can deal with anxieties and worries and depression nowadays. So for one, allow for the anxiety. So everyone is finding it so hard, and everyone is finding this pandemic so hard to deal with. But telling yourself that it isn't so bad or that others are suffering more may bring perspective, yes. Na parang, others naman, wala nga silang bahay or mas malala yung pinagdadaanan nila. Yes, it can give you a perspective, but it also minimizes and deny the real feelings. Remember, even Jesus, experienced all these negative emotions, and these negative emotions, these negative feelings, shouldn't be pushed aside or shrugged off because it's part of our whole being. If you want to be healed completely or wholly, we have to acknowledge these negative emotions, not shrug them away, but acknowledge them. Like what I do, I learned in the seminary, you talk to it. You acknowledge it. I saw this video of a dad teaching his daughter how to deal with anger. You can talk to the anger. Okay, I have anger. Okay, anger, you exist right now, and I'm not so feeling good right now. Or for example, it's anxiety, and I'm not so feeling good right now. You know, you're there, but you're not always gonna be there. So, okay, I will allow myself to feel you right now, and I will also lay you at the feet of Christ. That process, talking, hindi ka nababaliw when you talk. It really helps that you let it out of your system. So those feelings, the anxiety, the depressive thoughts or feelings, those are valid within themselves, and they can be understood actually. And one of the greatest things that we can do is to process it within the relationships that we have, within the mature friends that we have, family member, family members, creating closeness and trust. You don't just go out and broadcast, this is what I'm feeling, but just pick your inner circle where you can process all of those emotions healthily. If you have a psychotherapist, that's good. You can process your emotions. There's something good in it, when you process it. That's when you accept it. Okay, I have anxiety, and then you start processing it, healing comes.
Kasi there's
Okay,
acceptance.
yes. And then these anxieties, you can work it through. And you can enable a greater capacity to think and respond. And then second, you can tolerate complexity. We are complex beings. God didn't just create us uh we are multifaceted beings. So we will all experience guilt and anxiety and disappointments, and there are new ways of working it with others. Parang yung kanina. We can create a very complex of set of challenges for a person, and then avoid trying to make it simple. Because, what's happening in the world, it's really not simple. Don't Let's not try to really just simplify it, because it's really complex. Having a pandemic happening right now, being in an era where there's pandemic, I've never imagined. I've only heard about the Spanish influenza and the HIV outbreak, but I've never really imagined being in a situation in an era where I will be experiencing a pandemic, where I will be in the living sa
In an era
isang
like this.
panahon. Yeah,
Yeah.
because I've watched, the Book of Eli, and I thought, grabe, I cannot, imagine myself living in
And there,
such a
and there's a lot
situation
of
and condition.
references
But
eh. There's a lot of references, not just the movies, even books, no? Books na
even
mga tungkol sa mga pandemics, parang mga end of
yes,
times na yung datingan.
yes. And then number three is register your losses. So there are so many losses, or Nori, that we experience right now associated with the current crisis for each individual, or for us us as a community. So by losses, I mean loss of income.
Mhm.
According to the news, there are people who lost their jobs. 7 million Filipinos who lost their jobs. So
Mhm.
loss of income, loss of jobs, loss of loved ones. I cannot imagine experiencing all those three. So there are also more generalized losses, such as, just the loss of reliable patterns,
Mhm.
loss of trust in our system to keep us safe, from the anxiety. So we feel all more vulnerable because of this pandemic. And it is important to register your losses. If a journal can help you, you can note it. And one more important thing that the Bible teaches us is to lament,
Mhm.
to mourn them, because there's always a time for everything. This isn't, really the time na, okay, I'll turn my morning into dancing. Yes, we will come to that, but we can. This is the perfect time to exercise the theology of lament. I cannot, discuss that further because it's too wide of a topic. But we can read articles about lamenting, the theology of lament. Dr. Rico Villanueva of AGST wrote something good about it. So we lament. Okay. Also finding individuals where you can be honest, like I mentioned earlier. Find your inner circle,
Mhm.
whom you can trust, whom you can, express feelings with no, I forgot the term, but just for the lack of a better term, with no inhibitions. There you go.
Mhm.
So as we lament, we can also celebrate the good. God has, I believe, has given us the ability to still celebrate the good. This is not only a time for anxiety, but this is also the time where we can relate more to our loved ones and be close with them and intimate with them. And this is the time where we can remember, we can remember those details, those memories that we can create with them.
Mhm.
And this is the time for us to reach out, may it be through online. God has given us so much resources for us to reach out, for
Mhm.
us to make new friends. Diba? Meron pa nga po iba, may mga ECQ love story sila.
Correct.
So
Mhm.
it's okay
Yeah.
to do all those things. This is the perfect time for us to, be a part of something productive.
Mhm.
No, if you're not feeling productive, that's okay. But if it's also a time for us to be a part of valuable competencies, part of, prayer brigades, or
Mhm.
to be a part of, yung mga movements, diba?
Mhm.
Like sila Angel Oxin,
Yeah.
they would create movements, they would raise funds to
Yeah.
help the poor.
Actually,
Those
there's a lot of things that that this crisis also brought into life. Like
yes.
collaboration. Number one is
Mm,
people began appreciating collaboration more. more
Yeah.
than before this pandemic. Kasi dati
Mm-hmm.
kanya-kanyang tira lang, di ba? You know, this is
Mm-hmm.
my agenda and that is yours. And I'll do
Mm-hmm.
mine, you do yours. Parang ganun eh.
Yes.
But during this crisis, we've seen a lot of people collaborate together. You know, ideas after ideas, activities
Mm-hmm.
after activities. But aside from that, sorry, I'll just bring this in because you know we're gonna be running out of time in just a bit.
Mm-hmm.
I just want your thoughts on this, your position on this, because I've also noticed that with all these positivities happening, you know, events online, I mean, online events after online events
Mm-hmm.
by a lot of Christian organizations, Christian groups, but there is also this, you know, one factor of the online community or online society wherein Christians versus Christians are, you know, are at heads when it comes to the political stand, for example. You
Mm-hmm.
know, either they are too aggressive or they are non-aggressive at all, meaning
Too
apolitical.
passive.
Yeah, parang ganon. So,
Mm-hmm.
being a, you know, a pastor, being a Christian influencer, Paula, what's your take? What's your
Mm-hmm.
stand on this? You know, how should we be behaving in the middle of this?
Okay. First of all, we have to have a right hermeneutical framework before, you know, having a stand. I believe yun yung parang natutunan ko po sa seminary. Ibig sabihin, um, tamang hermeneutical framework, meaning you don't just pick a verse. For example, madalas naman natin po naririnig, Romans 13, submit to authorities. You don't just cherry pick. You know, you study the social, political, cultural context.
Mm-hmm.
Laging tinatatak sa amin yan. Context, context, context. Read, context, context, context. Study the context kung kailan nasulat yung Romans 13 so that we can biblically interpret it and apply it in our time today, in our culture. Okay. So, siguro po yung stand ko, I'm very vocal about it. I've been bashed because
Mm-hmm.
of this. But I still stand firm po dun sa stand na meron ako. I stand firm, parang it's so redundant, but I still stand firm on what I believe in. That, for example, with the EJK killings, just for example, okay, everybody has the right to, you know, what we call the due process of law. And at the same time, um, inflicting pain towards someone is a blatant disregard to the cross or for the cross. So, you know, taking away another person's life is like saying that the what Christ did on the cross is not enough, you know, because nobody. But I believe in the biblical truth that no one is beyond redemption. So my stand, what I remember, I learned this from my OT, my Old Testament exegesis professor, that the role of the Christian and the church in the political arena is to assert and maintain its prophetic voice. Kasi there's this, you know, when we study the Old Testament, ang akala ng mga tao, when you say prophetic, you just release prophetic, what do you call this? You just release prophecies, you know, towards a person. But there's a prophetic voice. There's a deeper biblical meaning to it. It implies being a constant critic to the powers in society. This is a grave responsibility that requires each believer to constantly struggle for insight and to deeply reflect on what the scriptures say about ethical and political issues. Well, my stand is this, also, stand din po doon ng professor ko, that it is biblical, of course, to pray for our leaders. Yes,
Yeah.
pray for our leaders by all means. And the Bible offers different frameworks of praying for them. If that is, you know, if that is all you can afford for now, that is okay, totally fine. But like what my professor said that I will be very generous with my opinion because you don't stop people. You pray about it, you pray for the leaders, but you don't stop people, other people calling out our leaders to account, because calling them to account is also biblical. Praying is biblical, but calling them out for the injustices and oppression is also biblical. In fact, insisting that prayer is the only appropriate response to the acts of our leaders is very unbiblical, unless the Bible that you're reading is made up of just few verses, cherry picking, and those verses are devoid
Yeah.
devoid of context. Because if you're gonna read the Old Testament, bibilisan ko lang po ito. If you read the Old Testament, if you're gonna take into consideration the bigger picture of the prophetic practice in the Old Testament and how it developed alongside the institution of monarchy. Monarchy kasi po yung type of government nila, tama po ba ako?
Yeah.
And in our country, it's a democratic country
Correct.
where we have a president.
Yeah.
They have a king. So it is true that, at the beginning, simula ng panahon ng Israel, there's monarchy, and the prophets like Samuel, Nathan, Gad, Ahijah, and the others, they had direct access to the king. They had direct access to the king precisely because the king was anointed by those prophets themselves. So during this early period, they were considered as central prophets. Why? Because they had access to the center of power. Okay? So they can rebuke the king right to their faces. Hey, David, that's wrong. You committed murder. You committed adultery. You know what I mean? However, nag-progress po kasi yung ating yung monarchy nila, and the schism between the national office and the true prophets of Yahweh also, it developed. So there are still prophets, but now at this point they are called court prophets. They have access to the king, but their only role at this point was to legitimize the agenda of the king. In short, they became yes men for the king, and the OT seems to consider them as false prophets. So now the narratives show that the co-optation and nationalization of the prophetic guilds, and how the true prophets of Yahweh eventually had to distance themselves from the king and the court prophets. That's why there's this prophet who would stay outside and eat his dung. It's like a form of protest. So the true prophets of Yahweh became marginalized. Yun po yun sila. Nandun sila sa mga gilid-gilid. Gilid ng society. They were pushed to the periphery. We see this in the story of Elijah, diba po, pinapapatay si Elijah, Micaiah, Jeremiah, and the scholars said that the rest of the prophets, whom the books of the latter prophets will eventually be named after, were all peripheral prophets. So from central to court to peripheral prophets, they were pushed to the margins. And these true prophets, they lost their political, social, and religious influence in the society. So if in our time, there's what we call red tagging, yun po yung red tagging sa time nila. Okay? They were well known for persistently pointing out the lack of justice and righteousness in their government, the abuses of their leaders. So one can say that the true prophet eventually became troublemakers for the political establishment dahil masyado silang negative.
Well, it's a pretty sensitive topic, honestly, to be covering. Because,
Yes.
again, as I've said earlier, in this current time, we've seen both the good and the bad side of Christianity. Merong pro, merong anti, merong
Yes.
I don't want to talk, I'm just gonna pray. Meron naman, I'll keep on talking until you listen. So, there's always this Tapos, ang pinakamahirap kasi dito, yung mismong mga Christians na yung nagbabanggaan just because they can't agree. Yun lang yung sad part.
Yes.
And nevertheless, Paula, do you have any last words to say? Because we're gonna be going over time. I hope let's cover this on another episode siguro. Let's try to expound more on this because I think it really needs to be talked about so that we can echo the message to the body of Christ talaga na there is this distinction between parang thin red line yan di ba? Or napakanipis na kailangan mong daanan pa. No, ito talaga So, parting words, Paula.
siguro I want to leave them with two things. Number one, pray for God to act. If that's you think God's calling you to do right now, pray for God to act. Take heart that the vindication of God's name lies not mainly, in our hands, but in God's. And um, so you pray that He will take action. If that's your calling for now, I commend you for that. I'll support you on that. But on the other side of the spectrum, there are people who are really, convicted to really speak out. So in First Peter 2 chapter 2 verses 13 to 15, it's extremely important, in this regard. It's extremely important because in these verses it gives us a warrant, like I said, prophetic voice, to exercise our prophetic voice. It gives us a warrant for prophetically confronting the government with its acts of injustice and oppression. So it says there, I'm going to read it, I'm going to end with that. Be subject for the Lord's sake to every human institution, whether it be to the emperor as supreme or to the governors as sent by him. Now, if you're going to notice those two clauses, it says there to punish those who do evil and to praise those who do good, for this will be the will of God, that by doing good you should put to silence the ignorance of the foolish people. So yes, the disposition of a Christian should be to support and be submissive to governments, local government and national governments. This is the part of God's will. But we should also, in writing, in speaking, and in conversation, and I would include in preaching all of this, publicly confront governors, mayors, barangay officials, presidents, who do not punish evil, who even partake in the evil and wickedness, who do not praise good, especially when we reverse the pattern and notice they start participating in the very evil they are supposed to punish. So, yes, we're called to preach the gospel, to evangelize, to disciple, but let us not forget that the church also has a warrant for prophetically denouncing such injustice and oppression. If we believe that, our president is acting in ways that do not confront evil, instead he partakes in it or in practice or participate in evil, and he does not support good but hinder good, we have a biblical warrant for publicly and prophetically denouncing those behaviors and policies.
All right. Well, as I've said in the beginning of this episode, it will be an interesting topic. Indeed, it was. In fact, in fact, it is not enough to be covering this in just 30 minutes. Anyways, Paula, thank you for coming on the program. Salamat ng marami sa'yo, ha?
Thank you so much po. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure.
All right. And ladies and gents, until the next episode, this has been your host, Nori Uy. Ingat po kayo. We're still on quarantine. Be blessed. Be safe.